Good morning, everybody. I know there are a lot of folks in the room that I know personally and probably have heard me do some of this, so I'll try to vary it up a little bit. And if you've heard it for too long, and you doze off, I won't be offended. That's okay. But I've been a part of, a number of years ago, I was a part of a CEO group, and they had a great little statement that they said to everybody that was part of the group. It was, let's try not to give advice, let's just give experience. So I'm not really here to preach to you. I'm here to just share some experiences with you. I think Karen and Fred really touched on some wonderful topics that, frankly, I think I can't really do justice to in a half hour or 40 minutes. But I'll try to touch on some other topics related to what I went through with starting and growing a business and ultimately exiting, and some things that might give you some tips. I know we have a very diverse audience. We have some students, we have some folks from the financial community, some business leaders, entrepreneurs, so hopefully you can take away something that's valuable. As you're getting started in the business, and I think both previous speakers touched on this, you really need to think about at the beginning where your end game's going to be. And it seems like a very obvious question, but I think Karen touched on it. Most people don't think about it. And they get into a business without thinking about where the end's going to be. The end can be anything. It can be what you want it to be. But you need to understand as you grow, that exit may change. And I started my business in '98 from scratch. And as was discussed before, I had everybody and their brother telling me I was nuts. 2 little kids at home and a mortgage, all typical expenses. I was 35 years old, had a wonderful job. And I walked out on that job. I walked out on that job not because something was wrong there. I think I probably could have stayed there my entire career. I was doing a good job. I think they liked me and felt I was doing a good job. But it was one of those things where I just had a burning desire to start a company. As was said before, if the motivation is to go and make a lot of money, it's absolutely the wrong motivation. I wanted to grow a business. And I wanted to start a company from scratch and build it. And that's really what my motivation was, to go grow something. Obviously, I was hoping at the end of the day that might lead to something and a financial reward, but that was not my motivation. So you had all these people kind of whispering, what are you doing? You got 2 little kids, you got a mortgage, you're nuts, you just walked away. And I honestly didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I had been in this healthcare transaction world for a long time. We basically handled claim transactions between healthcare providers and insurance companies. I had that experience, but when I quit, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I've been involved with soccer for a long time in my life. Maybe I'll open up an indoor soccer facility. There are 2 good ones in town, by the way, now. Back then, there wasn't one. And I started thinking of all these different businesses, putting business plans together, and then I finally realized, what the hell am I doing? I've been in this business for a long time. I have good relationships all around the country. I need to leverage that. So I started a business to take what we were doing with healthcare transactions between a PC and an insurance company, where we were kind of the electronic post office, if you will, and changing that to where we had the web as our communication tool, and there was nothing distributed out at a doctor's office. And he could then get online and process claims easily and more effectively and more efficiently and make money on his claims better than what he could have done previously, whether being on paper or with a PC distributed application. That's quick, what the business was about in a rough thumbnail. That idea, I don't have a technology bone in my body. And one of the first things you realize as you're putting together a business plan and thinking about what you're going to do is you have to really understand what you know and what you don't know. And thank God I was fortunate enough to hire a couple guys that knew how to develop systems I had worked with previously, and I coaxed them away to join me. It was completely on a dream. They had enough confidence in me and in themselves to join. And I didn't pay them what they were worth. At that time, remember, this was '98. The .com was just taking off. And frankly, they could have gone and done Y2K consulting and made a lot more money than what I was willing to pay them or could afford to pay them. Because again, as what Karen said earlier, you have to understand in the early stages of building a company, you aren't going to make any money. and you need to understand that going into it. And it may be a considerable amount of time before you do start making money. What's interesting with that is it's a double whammy. What I mean by that is you don't have income coming in and you're using your savings going out. So you're kind of getting hit from both ends there. And as you're getting started, sometimes you don't even realize that. So as I was getting started, I had a lot of motivation personally to grow a business. Similar to Karen, my father was an entrepreneur, and I always had the burning desire to run a business. I also, if I'm being really honest with everybody, and some of you in the room may have these feelings sometimes now, or maybe you have in your career, you always look at your bosses or the guy leading the company and go, I could do better than them. I'm much better than them. I can do that job. Well, you know what? 99.9% of the people say that, they never go do it. So my hat's off to the people that have actually done it, because the other people are still talking about their boss or their boss's boss or the owner of the business. As was said in Fred's comments, most fail. And frankly, you have to be half crazy to be an entrepreneur. You really do. Because those stats that Fred put up, they say it all. I mean, you may not make it, but if you don't believe in yourself and believe in your business and believe in your opportunity, nobody else is going to do it. So I think as you're getting started, you have to think about where you're going to take this thing. Do you want to turn it over to your children? Do you want to grow a big business? Do you want to keep a small business? There's not a right or wrong answer. The other thing that is most important here is you need money. The first couple years of growing my business, I bootstrapped it from the beginning and frankly ran out of money. Had the second mortgage on the house, had all the kids' savings, into the business, but I still knew I had a business. I wasn't making a dime. The business was growing. We knew what we were doing. I had been in the business. I had hired some people that knew, but we still hadn't got to the point where the lines crossed and we were making money. So as we were growing, that was a wonderful thing, but we didn't make money yet. So growth, you need to make sure it ultimately produces cash. And you hear the term cash is king, cash is king. It's absolutely true. If you don't have any cash, you're in trouble. So you got to make sure the business is well capitalized. So as we were going through, and we got to the point where there was no money left in the coffers, I went out to raise money. Again, to refresh everybody's memory, this was now the end of 1999, 2 years into it, and I like to tell you, I could articulate my business. I had a lot of good things to talk about, my differentiation from the competitors, and I had great employees. But at the end of the day, I was so fortunate. We raised money at the height of the dot-com craziness. So I like to think we were good and we knew our stuff, but as little as I've talked to you folks now, I had people in New York and Chicago and San Francisco saying, Jim, I want to put $10 million to work for you. I want to write you a check tomorrow. And I'm thinking, you don't know me from the man on the moon. This is nuts. And Fred was touching on some of this about getting to know who you're going to take money from. And again, as I said at the beginning, you don't have a clue when you're starting and running a business. You may think you are, but you will be humbled very, very quickly. So keep confidence in yourself, but keep your eyes wide open and listen to people and listen to as many different types of people as you can to get advice and understanding. I wish I had Karen and Fred talking to me as I got started. I said that to Karen right when she finished her talk. I wish she was around when I was getting started. But so again, networking is unbelievably important. So in '99, we went out to raise money. We went out to a whole bunch of folks, and we hired an investment banking group. This is one thing I think everybody should consider when they're looking to raise money and they haven't done it before. There are a lot of folks out there that's what their business is. They'll help you go find and raise money. And as Fred touched on, there are tons of investors out there. But finding investors that know your business, know what you're doing, can understand it. If you sit there and you have to spend the first 2 hours of your conversation with these guys educating them on 101 of your business, they're the wrong investor. You're going to spend the rest of your time doing that. So we went out to raise money in '99. We were fortunate to raise money. I know the exact date the money was wired into our account was February 8th of 2000. And it was a wonderful, wonderful feeling. We had money in the bank. Again, to refresh everybody's memory, March 10th of 2000, the dot-bomb bubble hit. And so, again, we were so lucky. There were people that had much better businesses than our little business that 6 months later couldn't raise money. So, again, I think we knew our stuff, but timing was everything. So we embarked on growing this business. About 2.5 years later, the lines crossed and we started making money, which was a wonderful, wonderful time. But as we were growing, we now had 3 VCs in our company. We had a board now that wasn't me, myself, my plant, and my trash can. It was now a sophisticated professional board, which was totally new to me. These guys, as Fred touched on, VCs have very different motivations. And 10X or 27X, you know, you're sitting there going, how the hell am I going to make that happen for them? And when am I going to make that happen for them? So my motivation when it was the first couple years and it was conversations with my plant and my trash can, now turned up to be conversations with, you know, very professional people that were looking to find out how am I going to get an exit and make a return for my limited partners in my fund. So we had to start thinking very differently. And on one hand, you know, you can see why VCs sometimes get a bad name if you choose the wrong ones. But on the other hand, they can help you immensely be better with your business. They can get you more professional. I had one of my investors tell me, Jim, I know you're a small company. Don't think like a small business. Operate like you're a public company. And if you do that and think that way, you can position the business a whole lot more professionally when you ultimately get to the stage of exiting. So we had to change our thinking as things grew in the business, and we were becoming a very different company and growing from 5 employees to 10 employees to 50 employees to 100 employees. And it's very, very different. You have to become professional in all functional areas of your business. In particular, and it was touched on legal, I think that's very, very important, having the right legal, but also internally having the right human resources. I mean, you have employment contracts that were touched on. You have things in those employment contracts that are very, very important at time of exit that you have to consider, and your lawyer and your HR person can help you navigate through that. But HR, and I'll digress a little bit here, was something that was very, very important to me, in particular the culture that we created. Culture was very, very important to me from the day we started the business. Some things we did right, some things we did wrong. You know, again, we were at kind of the crazy .com time. So we didn't necessarily have a keg on tap, but I will tell you we did have a fun work environment, a casual work environment, and I think employees loved that aspect of the job. Fast forwarding, when we exited, I had 2 questions that I thought were just, I literally laughed. I had 2 questions when we announced we sold the business. You know what they were? One was, can we still wear jeans? And the other one was, can we now get our name on the building? And I looked at everybody, I was like, that's the best you got for me? I've been losing sleep over this meeting with you guys, and you got those 2 questions for me? Give me a break. So let me go back. Building culture, I think, is incredibly important. And, you know, Karen touched on recruiting the right people and recruiting personalities. You know, I'll never, ever forget, as we were building our team, and I think building a team is so incredibly important to the exit, because Fred will tell you most investors aren't really betting on the business as much as they're betting on the people that are running that business. So having the right team is incredibly important. So I'll never forget hiring a CFO, and I had Ted Turner's former CFO sitting in my office. Again, we didn't, you know, as my father would say, excuse my French, have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out. And I had Ted Turner, CFO, sitting in my office, and I'm thinking, this is nuts. What is this guy talking to me for? But what was really cool was, as we were growing a neat new business, we had a lot of interest. And this guy literally said to me, as well as other CFO candidates, I've never done a startup. I've done so many things in my career, but this is the coolest thing, building and growing a company from nothing. which it absolutely is. I was very, very fortunate, I will tell you. We had a successful exit. But if I fell on my face and it didn't work out, I would still say, and I bet Karen would tell you, and other entrepreneurs that have had successful exit would tell you, it was the best thing they ever did. I was never more energized to come to work and grow that business than when I was doing Pearpath. And God knows it was tough. I used to be 6'4" with jet black hair. I'm telling you, it was tough. But seriously, you know, having the right culture, having the right people, bringing the right people into your business. I didn't hire Ted Turner, CFO. He obviously was qualified, but he wasn't the right person for our company. He was not the right fit with me. He was not the right fit with our management team. So we really, really looked at that. I think Karen's point is spot on. You have to have the right people for what you're doing and what you're trying to create. I am currently with, as Richard said, I'm currently with Marlin Equity Partners out of Los Angeles, and I'm now on the other side of the table doing investments in companies and overseeing companies in the portfolio. And there are 4 things we look at. I think it's very important. And we looked at them as we were growing the business. We needed to make sure we could articulate the market we were in. Investors want to be in a growing market. They want to be in a market opportunity that has an opportunity to create a bigger company. Once we got investors, they didn't want us to stay small and, Jim, you're going to turn this business over to your children. I knew we had an exit that we had to give them at some time. So we had to be able to show to our employees, to the outside world, to the investors, we had a great market opportunity here. Second thing is we had to have a team to be able to execute on attacking that market. And again, whether it was a CFO that got us to be a much more professional company and deliver audited financials, which, by the way, that's very, very important. You can get away with selling a business without them, but you'll be much better off if you do have audited financials. Little safety tip. You're much better off if you have financials that are professionally prepared, that are followed up by operational metrics that are incredibly detailed. There's no one that should know the business better than you and your team. So when you're presenting to someone, you need to be able to present that business with conviction and with the proper factual data to back it up as to why you're a great company. So your team helps you do that. Again, I can barely fire up my computer, so thank God I had great IT people, great finance guy, a sales guy that was just absolutely dynamic. I beg to differ with Karen. I think sales is incredibly important. I think she's done it the right way, but most businesses, as she tells you, she's in the minority that feels that way, but sales was the lifeblood of what we're doing, which, you know, leads to the next point. You have to have a competitive, differentiated offering. You know, if you can't articulate why you're better than that competitor or that competitor or that competitor, you're going to have trouble. And you need, ideally, if you have some IP that's proprietary, and you can take that intellectual property and be very different in the market, so be it. But, you know, your competitive differentiation, whether it's customer service or whether it's IT or whether it's your sales and distribution model, whatever it is, it has to be spot on, and you need to be able to prove it with fact in operational metrics that ultimately link to your financials and how you're making money, which is the last point. So you got a big market opportunity. You got to have a hell of a team that's executing on that market opportunity, a differentiated model, and then finally, you have to have a financial model that makes money. And that sounds quite obvious, but there are so many business people and entrepreneurs I talk to that may have a wonderful widget, they may have a wonderful idea, but they can't articulate how that business is ultimately going to make money. And at the end of the day, again, as I said earlier, you got to have capital to be infused in that business to get it to grow appropriately, but you got to be able to show how you can use that capital to make money. I hope I'm not overstating the obvious. As you're growing the business, I think what's really important is how you communicate where you're going to go with it. We took an approach with our culture. We did a lot of really cool things. Matter of fact, my friend Craig in the front row here gave me a great idea. We had little marble blocks He may not remember, he even told me this. Little marble blocks made that had our PayerPath logo on it, said, "Thanks for helping build the company." In the bottom corner, it had the employee's number. I can't tell you how many people loved that. They would go, "What number were you? What number were you, Karen? What number were you, Richard?" And as we were building, it was really, really cool for people to have that. We had, a little more digression, we had Song of the Day. Every day, 5 minutes to 9, somebody would play a song over the intercom. It could be Rolling Stones, Start Me Up. It could be whatever you wanted to play, a Christmas song during the holidays. Employees loved it. They passed it around to different employees, loved it. We had a very fun culture, but I don't want to mislead you. We worked our butts off. I'll never forget my VCs telling me, "You got to change the benefits." I was like, "What do you mean we got to change our benefits?" "Yeah, every employee has 4 weeks vacation." This is nuts. I don't have a company that has every employee with 4 weeks vacation. I said, "I'll tell you what, why don't you come by the office tomorrow morning at 6:30 and see if the 4th floor lights are on. And then take a walk up here on the 4th floor and see who's here." I didn't tell them to come in at 6:30. And I'll tell you what, tonight it'll be dark at 7. See if the lights are still on and see who's here. I have to tell people to take vacation. So I'm just throwing that out to tell you, create the kind of culture that's going to make a difference with your business. As we were growing during that crazy .com time, people were throwing salaries at people and things I couldn't do. So I had to create a culture for my employees that they loved being there. And I told everybody my #1 job as CEO of that company was not the normal type things people would spit off. My #1 priority was making that the best place they ever worked. And if I did that, I would have a very loyal employee base. And again, what I said before is important. I knew I was only so good. I was only going to be as good as the team we had and the team that worked together that we had. So we created a wonderful, wonderful team. And when we exited, you know, that was probably my proudest moment, was having the employees tell me, "You did create the best place I ever worked." And I always used to say, one day when you're back in retirement, I want you to be sitting there with your family and friends or a cocktail in your hand or whatever you're doing and say, "PayerPath was the best place I ever worked." And then I was successful. That's the way I looked at it. And that's completely sincere. So as you're positioning, as you're growing this culture, you're growing a business, you're attacking this market opportunity, you're differentiating your product, you got sales taking off, you're now thinking, how do I communicate with this team what we're going to do? Again, we had a culture, we communicated everything. We would show up every month in a monthly employee meeting, top to bottom financials. Even when we were losing a lot of money, we showed them. I always used to tell them, I always hated being in the dark at other companies. I hated it. I'd be in the dark at a company and not even know how we were doing, what we were doing. I said, "You're going to know everything, whether we sold anything last month, whether we're making money, losing money, whatever." And employees loved that. At times, they should have been scared. But frankly, I think they had faith. They had faith in each other. They had faith in me, thank God. And we kept showing how we were progressing and moving the ball forward. So as it got time to think about positioning for an exit, it was contrary to my belief to not communicate, "Hey guys, we're going to sell the business." But I was fortunate, because what I had done from the very beginning was, and this is both good and bad, so I hope this helps you in thinking about this. Karen touched on, phantom stock or shadow stock, I think she called it. But I had a belief that, okay, I had 4 weeks vacation, so I'm going to have everybody have 4 weeks vacation. I'm no different than anybody else. I'll clean out the refrigerator when it's dirty. We're not going to have hierarchy in this. I know buck stops with me. I'm not afraid to make a decision, but everybody's going to roll their sleeves up and work, and we're going to have that kind of environment. But I also said everybody's going to have stock in the company. And I thought that was a great thing to do, because it was exactly what our culture was like, spoke to the mission of how I wanted to run the business, but it was not the right thing to do, and I'll tell you why. When certain people at certain levels in the business, or certain, frankly, understanding of stock, have stock, it doesn't necessarily change their behavior. And you should use that equity for the people that it's going to change their behavior and impact your business. And in hindsight, everybody had it, and I was very happy that everybody, got a nice check at the end of the day when we exited. But I could have done that differently for them, and they still could have had the same outcome, but I could have had the equity in the hands of people that it really would have affected the way they looked at their job day to day. So I just encourage you to think about that. On one hand, it's wonderful for everybody to have stock. On the other hand, the equity is your greatest potential, currency, if you will, for motivation of the staff and motivation at the time of an exit. As you're positioning, I mentioned iBankers before. When we went to raise money, we hired an iBanker to help us go raise money, brought us to people that knew healthcare, knew our space, could understand it, invested at the certain stage we were looking to, all those type of things. So I think when we looked to exit, we had a very interesting dynamic, and I hope I'm not going over here. We had a very interesting dynamic. As we were growing the business, we were looking for other distribution channels and ways to grow our business. And we were trying to do a deal with one of the largest healthcare IT players in the country. It was a $2 billion company based in London. And we wanted to be kind of Intel inside, not to use that cliche. We wanted to be PayerPath inside in all those doctor offices' computer systems that they had all around the country, and they had about 85,000 of them. And this was the Mac Daddy sale we could possibly make. Well, we were working on that, and our head of sales, Jim Riley, had been working on it for probably over a year. And it was progressing to contracting review, and we were feeling over the moon excited. We had zero positioning for sale at this point, zero. We were growing at a great clip, winning awards, having a great time, blah, 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 blah. Well, they threw a huge monkey wrench in the middle of this potential partner, because in the 11th hour, we were going to sign this relationship to be PayerPath inside of all their computer systems, and they said, you know what? We sat around the board table and we wanted to do this deal with you, and we decided we don't want to do it, we want to buy you. We're not going to have a wholesale retail relationship with you. That's not what we want to do. We want to own you. Well, I got shorter and grayer during this next period of time, because we then had discussions amongst the board and trying to figure out what to do. A couple things, again, back to communication. We were very open and communicated everything to our employees, but we couldn't talk about this. Why? They were a public company. It could not get leaked out. So we had to have a very tight inner circle. And again, it was against the way I wanted to run and manage my company, but it's what we had to do. So you need to make sure you have your communication around an exit tightly monitored in terms of communication, and have a close-knit group that you're working through this process, and obviously people you can trust. So we had some board discussions, and getting back to investment bankers, we didn't want to hire one. We felt we had someone on the hook that could do a deal, that could make a great transaction. And I'll never forget sitting with Gary LeClaire at a Starbucks, which is like my office away from my office. And I'll digress real quick on Starbucks, forgive me. Gordy's heard me say this. Get a book called Pour Your Heart Into It. It's a Starbucks story. It talks a lot about culture, but it's a book about growing a business, and it's fascinating. It's called Pour Your Heart Into It, written by Howard Schultz, and phenomenal book, phenomenal read. Well, as we were trying to figure out what to do here, we had a board meeting, and our investors and management kind of decided, this is a great opportunity. And Gary LeClaire said to me at this Starbucks, he said, Jim, people look to get paid a discounted cash flow kind of multiple that you're getting paid on revenue. This is nuts. I mean, you got to do this. We didn't want to sell, as crazy as that sounds. We didn't want to sell. But again, going back to, it wasn't all about me. This wasn't me in 1999 with my own company. I had investors. I made the conscious decision to bring them in. And I always told my employees, there's going to come a day where one of three things will happen. We go IPO, which, as Fred said, is very unlikely. We recap the business, get new investors, and have a whole new runway. You know, typically runways with investors are 4 to 7 years, 4 to 6 years. It varies depending upon who they are. We sold almost exactly 6 years to the day. And again, we weren't planning on it. But our offers got to the point where it just was silly for us not to sell. So after the third time I told this company no, ultimately they got to the price we wanted. During that process, though, this is very interesting, I think, I think we put the fear of God in them that we were going to sell to somebody else, because I told them at the beginning, and it's a wonderful place to be selling from a position of strength. We don't want to sell. We didn't have a book together. We didn't hire a banker. We're not positioned to sell. We're growing, you know, leaps and bounds every year. We got a wonderful trajectory. Thank you, but no thanks. It's a wonderful place to be. But when it got to a price, we had to make a decision. So we said we can take their offer, or we can hire a banker. We can hire a banker that they know, that is going to bring us to all the competitors that they know. And frankly, once we did that, it put the fear of God in them. They upped their price, and they said, we want to put it at a price this high, and we're going to do it exclusive, take it off the market. And that's exactly what happened. So that was very important. I think, again, a little bit more on positioning. Your financials and your operational metrics inside your business are going to be dissected. Everything you can imagine will be asked. So again, having good people that know their functional areas, whether it's sales, whether it's customer support, and can really nail all the metrics as to how well you're doing is so unbelievably important. Our CFO was worth his weight in gold during the sale process. He and I went out, and I can't tell you how many meetings we had with our board, with our investors, with people that invested in their funds, with the company that was acquiring us to get to this point. So I think that's unbelievably important. You know, and there's some students in the room, I think a great question is, how much is a business worth? How much is the business that sells these water bottles worth? Anybody have the answer to that? The answer is really simple, what somebody's willing to pay. And you have no clue. I'll never forget sitting at board meetings with one of my investors, who probably would fall under the category of one of the slides that was up there earlier, but I'll leave that there for a minute. He said to me, Jim, you're nuts. They're not going to pay that for the business. They're just trying to get us on the hook. This same guy was doing cartwheels when we sold the business. But you know, he was the biggest pain in the butt when we were selling the business, and he thought he was going to get a fraction of that. So again, your investors and who you select and how you select them, make sure you really understand who they are. I made some good choices and made some bad choices in hindsight. What else do I want to leave you with here in my remaining couple minutes? I will tell you, leaving the business is something that you don't realize how hard it's going to be. I ended up, after we were acquired, I ended up staying. I wasn't expecting to stay. I was expecting to go sail off in the sunset and start another company. But I ended up staying, and it was a interesting process. I told Richard we could do a case study on my 18 months at London publicly traded Mises. Sir Dominic Cadbury of Cadbury Schweppes was our chairman, by the way, just the prince of a man. 3 months after we were acquired, the company that was based in London was started in 1979 by scratch. The CEO there decided to do a management buyout, or tried to do a management buyout. So for the next 5 months, I was sitting in meetings in London and in Raleigh and going, this is wild. I didn't expect to stay, but this is kind of cool. I'm getting a chance to watch all of this. For the next 5 months, all this went on, and then after 5 months, Sir Dominic said, we're not going to sell the business. We're not getting offers, and you, CEO, who started this in '79, thank you, but you're fired because you can't do a management buyout. Try to do a management buyout and then stay. So I was part of this operating board in London. That was 10 of us, and there were 2 of us standing. And I'm going, I didn't even want to stay. This is crazy. Next thing they did was they brought in a CEO who was the number 2 or 3 guy from IBM, who proceeded to bring in McKinsey consultants all across the board, and Boston Consulting Group, and every consulting EIEIO name you can mention. And it was fascinating. And what's interesting about a lot of these groups is they get everybody to tell them inside the company what's going on, and then they regurgitate it back in wonderful PowerPoint slides, and make it like original thought, which I found fascinating. But and then get paid huge 7-figure sums to do it. So I'm not putting it down. I think it's a wonderful gig if you can get it. But I ultimately, after about 18 months in reorg du jour number 37, I decided it was time for me to move on, and I left. And I can't tell you how difficult that was. It was unbelievably hard. So when you look to exit, be prepared for a difficult departure. And I think that comes when you have great people that you care about, and a great business, and relationships that mean a lot. And I think when that sincerity comes through to employees, you can do a ton. So, Richard, I'll just end on that, and I know we have some time for some questions.
Thank you, Jim.
Sure.